Say it again, Damian Vale whispered, leaning forward in his wheelchair like the courtroom belonged to him. Tell them you never wanted my life. Lila Hart didn't flinch, not because she was brave, but because she was empty in a very clean, quiet way. The kind of emptiness that happens after you've cried until your body forgets how. Across the aisle, cameras blinked. Phones hovered like small, hungry eyes. Somewhere behind her, a woman sniffled, one of those public sniffles meant to be heard. Damian's lawyer rose smoothly. Your Honor, we contend Ms. Hart cultivated sympathy, exploited Mr. Vale's disability. The judge raised a hand. Silence dropped in a single sheet. Then the judge looked down at a file that looked heavier than paper should. Ms. Hart, he said, voice calm, almost bored. Before we continue, I need to verify something. Lila's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag, not because she expected mercy, because she recognized the scent in the courtroom. Gardenia, faint and impossible, like a memory walking in without permission. The judge slid one document forward. Do you recognize this name? He asked. Lila's eyes lowered. And there it was. Hartwell Education and Land Trust, primary beneficiary, Lila Hart. A small murmur moved through the room, like wind through dry leaves. Damian's smile faltered just for a second, just long enough for everyone to notice it wasn't confidence. It was fear. The judge's gaze lifted. Ms. Hart, do you know what you own? And right in that moment, Damian Vale, the man who once shone like a promise, realized something too late. Some apologies don't arrive in time to save you. But this story doesn't begin here. To understand why the word own turned the air to ice, we have to go back. Back to a small town called Meadowbrook, where people still believed love was enough to keep a man good. Meadowbrook smelled like morning bread and wet soil, the kind of town where the same old dog slept in the same patch of sun, and the same old women judged the world from the same old bench near the market. Lila Hart belonged to that rhythm. She taught second graders at Meadowbrook Primary. Small hands, crooked letters, missing teeth, and questions that hit you in the heart when you least expected. Miss Hart, a boy once asked, serious as an adult, if my dad leaves again, does that mean I'm not worth staying for? Lila had crouched down until her eyes were level with his, and she'd said the things she wished someone had said to her when she was little. No, it means your dad is the one who hasn't learned how to stay. That was Lila. She didn't shine in a loud way. She warmed you, slowly, gently, like sunlight coming through curtains. She lived in a small rented house with a narrow porch, and on that porch, no matter the season, she kept two pots, one for mint, one for gardenias. The gardenias were stubborn. They bloomed when they felt like it, and when they did, the whole porch smelled like a promise. Damian Vale arrived in Meadowbrook like a different kind of weather. He came in sleek cars, in tailored shirts, in confidence that didn't ask permission. He was from Meadowbrook originally. People said that like it explained everything. He made it, the town whispered. Our Damian made it. He was a developer, a name on billboards 2 towns over, the kind of man who could buy a building with a signature and a smile. He met Lila at a charity event for the school. She'd been stacking donated books, hair falling into her face, sleeves rolled up, when a shadow fell over the table. I think you're doing the heavy lifting alone, a voice said. Lila looked up. Damian's smile was polished, but his eyes looked tired in a way money couldn't fix. I'm fine, Lila said automatically because she always said she was fine. Damian picked up a box without being asked. No, he corrected softly. You're capable. That's different. It wasn't a line. It didn't sound rehearsed. And for the first time in a long time, Lila felt seen without being examined. They started small. Coffee after school. A walk by the river. Damian listening, actually listening, when Lila talked about her students. You talk like you're building people, he said one night. Lila laughed, embarrassed. I'm just teaching them how to read. Damian shook his head. No, You're teaching them they matter. The town fell in love with them before Lila even admitted she might be. Meadowbrook liked a story it could understand. The successful man returns. The gentle teacher is chosen. The wedding will be beautiful. Even Lila's mother, gone now, only a framed photograph with kind eyes, seemed to approve from the shelf where Lila kept her favorite books. Lila didn't have much family left, just memories. And Damien, in those early months, treated her memories like something sacred. On the night he proposed, it rained. Not a storm, just steady rain tapping the porch rail like patient fingers. Damien knelt on the wooden boards, wet jeans, wet hair, eyes bright. "I don't want a life that looks good," he said. "I want a life that feels like home." Then he held out the ring. Lila's breath caught. And for a second, the whole world narrowed to that small circle of silver and light. "Yes," she whispered, because every part of her wanted to believe. Damien slid the ring onto her finger like a vow, and the gardenias, stubborn as they were, bloomed the very next morning. It felt like a blessing, but blessings, Lila would learn, don't stop a man from breaking if he refuses to be held. The accident happened 3 weeks before the wedding. It was a phone call at first, the kind that steals the air out of your lungs before you even understand the words. "Miss Hart, this is Stone Harbor Regional Hospital. Your fiancé, Mr. Vale, he's been in an accident." Lila didn't remember dropping the chalk, but she remembered the sound it made when it hit the floor. A small snap, like something thin breaking. She drove too fast. She prayed without knowing who she was praying to. At the hospital, everything smelled like disinfectant and fear. Damien lay pale against the white sheets, face drawn, jaw clenched. His leg was wrapped, elevated, surrounded by machines that beeped like impatient metronomes. When he saw Lila, his eyes filled. "Hey," she breathed, taking his hand carefully like it might shatter. Damien squeezed weakly. "I'm here," she promised immediately like a reflex. He swallowed. "They said, it's bad." Lila nodded, even though she didn't understand the medical words yet. She nodded because nodding was something she could do without falling apart. Days became a blur. Surgery, doctors, insurance calls. Damien's mother, sharp-tongued, tight-faced, blaming the universe. When the verdict came, it arrived without drama. Damien would not walk for a long time. Maybe not the same way again. A wheelchair rolled into the room like an unwanted guest. Lila tried to make it normal. She brought him books. She brought him soup from the only diner he liked. She decorated his hospital room with a small gardenia bloom from her porch. Damien stared at it. "I used to run," he said suddenly, voice rough. "I used to walk into rooms and people moved." Lila sat on the edge of the bed. "They still will," she said. Damien's laugh was short and bitter. "No, they'll smile at me, then look away." Lila reached for his hand again. He pulled it back, not violently, just enough. And that was the first crack. When he came home, the world had changed shape. Stairs became enemies, doorways became narrow, silence became louder. Damien's pride, always sleek, always sharp, couldn't find a place to rest. He stopped answering calls from friends. He stopped letting Lila help him dress. When she tried to assist, he snapped. "I'm not a child," he said. "I know," Lila replied, voice careful. You just what?" Damien's eyes flashed. "You just want to feel like a saint?" Lila froze. "What?" she whispered. Damien looked away, jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. "I see the way you look at me. I look at you because I love you." "No," he said, voice low. "You look at me like I'm broken." Lila's throat tightened. "I'm trying," she said quietly. "I'm trying to be here." Damien's lips curled. "Of course you are. Everyone loves a tragedy." The words didn't make sense. Not yet. But they landed anyway. In the final week before the wedding, Meadowbrook turned their pity into decorations. Neighbors brought casseroles. Old friends dropped by with forced cheer. "Your love is inspiring," they told Lila. as if she were performing, as if Damien were a lesson. Damien heard every word, and each time someone called Lila devoted, Damien's eyes grew darker. The night before the wedding, Lila found him in the living room, staring at his suit hanging from the door. He didn't turn when she entered. "I should cancel," he said. Lila's heart lurched. "Don't say that." Damien's voice sharpened. "Why not? You want the wedding pictures? You want everyone clapping for the brave teacher who married the cripple?" Lila flinched. "Don't call yourself that." Damien turned then, and his eyes were wet. Not soft, not vulnerable, wet like anger has nowhere else to go. "What else am I?" he demanded. Lila stepped forward. "You're Damien," she said. "You're the man I love." Damien's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And if I never walk again?" "Then we learn a different way," Lila said, voice shaking. "Together." Together. That word, once warm, now sounded like a chain. Damien stared at her for a long moment, like he was deciding what to do with her faith. Then he looked away. "Go to sleep," he muttered. Lila did, but sleep didn't come, because somewhere deep inside her, a quiet instinct whispered, "Something is slipping." The wedding day arrived bright and cruel. Sunlight flooded the small chapel. Flowers lined the aisle. White lilies, soft roses, too perfect. Lila's dress fit like a dream she'd been afraid to touch. In the mirror, she looked like herself, but softer. Hope does that. It rounds the sharp edges. Outside, guests gathered. Laughter, camera flashes, whispers. "Poor Damien," someone said. "But look at her, such a good woman." Lila walked down the aisle to the sound of music and held breath. Damien waited at the front, in his wheelchair, suit immaculate, hair styled, face unreadable. When Lila reached him, she smiled, small, real. Damien didn't smile back. The officiant began. Vows, promises. Lila's hands trembled as she spoke. "I choose you," she said, voice thick. "In every season, in every storm." Then Damien's turn. He stared at her for a long second, and Lila, still believing, leaned in like she could share her courage through air. Damien's voice rang out, cold and clear. "I can't do this." A gasp rippled. Lila blinked. "Damien!" He lifted a hand, stopping her like she was an interruption. "You all think this is beautiful," he said, turning to the crowd. "Right? The noble teacher marrying the poor, broken man." Murmurs. Lila felt her blood drain. Damien's eyes cut back to her. "Tell me, Lila, would you still be here if I was just a man in a wheelchair with no money?" Lila's lips parted. Damien's laugh was sharp. "Don't lie. Don't play saint. You want the story. You want the sympathy. You want—" "Stop," Lila whispered, voice breaking. "Please." Damien's jaw tightened. Then, with a cruelty that felt rehearsed, he said it. "This wedding is canceled." A stunned silence. And then, like a crack in ice, whispers started. Lila stood there, in white, in front of everyone who'd ever known her, while the man she loved turned her into a rumor. Damien's mother rose immediately, face tight with satisfaction. "I knew it," she hissed to someone nearby. "I knew she was after something." Lila couldn't breathe. The officiant stammered. Someone dropped a program. Damien's wheelchair turned slightly as if he were preparing to leave. Lila reached out. Her fingertips brushed his sleeve. Damien jerked away like she'd burned him. "Don't touch me," he said, low enough only she could hear. "I won't be your charity case." Then he rolled back, away from the altar, away from her, leaving white petals under his wheels like crushed promises. Lila stood alone, and something inside her, something tender, died quietly, without anyone noticing. Outside the chapel, the sun was still bright, cruelly bright, and Meadowbrook's love for her turned into curiosity. Curiosity turned into judgment. By evening, the town had rewritten her story. She heard it in the market, in the school hallway, in the pauses that grew where warmth used to be. She must have done something. He wouldn't humiliate her like that for no reason. Maybe she really was in it for the money. Lila stopped defending herself, not because she agreed, because she realized something. If people want a villain, they will build one. And she was tired of being built. So she packed 2 suitcases, wrapped her gardenia pot in newspaper, and left Meadowbrook behind. Not with a dramatic goodbye, with a quiet decision. She would not die in a town that only loved her when she was easy to admire. Stone Harbor welcomed her with rain. Not a storm, just constant drizzle, like the city was always in the middle of exhaling. Lila rented a small apartment above a bookstore. The stairs creaked, the windows fogged, and at night, the sound of rain on glass felt like a lullaby that didn't ask questions. Her first morning there, she stood in the bookstore downstairs and ran her fingers along spines like they were old friends. The owner, an older woman with silver hair, watched her gently. "New in town?" the woman asked. Lila nodded. "Just starting over." The woman smiled like she understood more than Lila had said. "Then you picked the right building. Books don't care who you used to be." Lila swallowed hard, grateful in a way that hurt. At Juniper Elementary, the children were different from Meadowbrook's kids. More city-sharp, louder, faster. But children were children everywhere. They tested boundaries. They asked impossible questions. They carried secrets in small bodies. On the 3rd week, a girl named Marnie stayed after class, staring at Lila's gardenia plant that sat by the window. "It smells like my grandma," Marnie whispered. Lila smiled softly. "Then it's doing its job." In the evenings, Lila built a new routine. Tea, lesson plans, pages of novels turning under lamplight. And her hands that had once shaken in a chapel, began to steady. That's when Rowan Pierce appeared in her life. Not like Damien, no bright entrance, no glamorous wait. Rowan was quiet. The kind of quiet that didn't demand space, but somehow made you feel safe enough to breathe. He worked at the bookstore downstairs, managing inventory, repairing old bindings, speaking to books like they were living things. Lila first noticed him because he always smelled faintly of cedar and rain. One evening, she came down to return a book and found him on a ladder reaching for a high shelf. He glanced down. "Hey," he said, voice warm. Lila hesitated. "Hi." Rowan climbed down carefully, setting the book in his hand like it mattered. "You like poetry," he noted, seeing what she held. Lila glanced at the cover, embarrassed. "Sometimes, when I can't sleep." Rowan nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Poetry is good for insomnia. It's small enough to hold when your mind gets too loud." Lila blinked. Damien used to call her books cute. Rowan spoke about them like they were medicine. "You're Lila," Rowan said, not asking, just remembering. "Upstairs." Lila's throat tightened. "Yeah." Rowan gestured toward the counter. "There's tea in the back, if you ever want quiet company." He didn't say you look lonely. He didn't say you should smile. He simply offered a space. Lila wasn't ready to take it. Not at first. But slowly, little by little, she started sitting in the bookstore after closing, grading papers while Rowan fixed torn pages. They didn't talk much, and that was the miracle. Because after betrayal, silence can feel like a threat. But Rowan's silence felt like a blanket. One night, the rain was heavier than usual. Lila looked up from her papers and found Rowan watching the street through the window. "Do you like the rain?" she asked, surprising herself. Rowan smiled faintly. "I like what it covers," he said. Lila's chest tightened. "What do you mean?" Rowan's eyes stayed on the glass. "Sometimes the world feels sharp," he said quietly. "Rain makes it softer. Like you can start over without everyone seeing your edges." Lila didn't speak for a moment. Then, in a voice so small it barely existed, she said, "I left a town because people watched me break." Rowan turned to her, expression gentle, not curious. "I'm sorry," he said. 2 words. No demand for details, no hunger for a story, just compassion. Lila looked down quickly, blinking hard. And for the first time since the wedding, she felt something unclench inside her. Not love, not yet. Just possibility. The past doesn't always chase you with footsteps. Sometimes it arrives in an envelope. It came on a Tuesday. Plain paper. Official stamp. Lila opened it in her kitchen with damp hands. Her eyes moved across the words and the room seemed to tilt. Damian Vale versus Lila Hart claims defamation, reputational harm, financial damages. Lila's breath caught. He was suing her. Not because she'd said anything, she hadn't, but because silence, to a man like Damian, was a refusal to let him control the narrative. Her hands shook as she read the accusations. That she'd manipulated public sympathy, that she'd painted him as cruel, that she'd abandoned him, causing emotional distress. Lila sank into a chair. For a moment, she was back in the chapel, white dress, crushing shame. Her phone buzzed, a Meadowbrook number. She didn't answer. The buzz stopped, then started again. Finally, she picked up, voice thin. Hello? A familiar voice, an old colleague from Meadowbrook Primary, spoke quickly. Lila, I'm sorry, but people are saying he's going to ruin you. They're saying you'll have to pay. Lila's stomach turned. I don't have anything, she whispered. On the other side, the colleague hesitated. You might, she said slowly. Lila, do you remember your mother's paperwork? The stuff she kept locked away? Lila froze. Her mother had died years ago. A quiet death. No drama, no inheritance, no big reveal. Just a box of documents Lila never fully understood. I don't know, Lila said. The colleague lowered her voice. I overheard Damian's mother once, she confessed. She said, your mom's land used to be valuable. Something about a trust. Lila's heart pounded. That night, she brought the lawsuit papers downstairs to the bookstore. Rowan was closing up, turning off lights one by one. He saw her face and immediately set the keys down. What happened? He asked, voice steady. Lila held out the envelope like it was poison. Rowan read the first page, his jaw tightening. He's suing you, he said quietly. Lila laughed once, small and broken. Apparently, I ruined his reputation by leaving. Rowan's eyes lifted to hers. That's not how truth works, he said. Lila swallowed. I don't know how to fight him, she admitted. He has money, lawyers, a name. Rowan folded the paper carefully. Then we don't fight him with noise, he said. We fight him with facts. Lila stared. You sound like you've done this before. Rowan hesitated, just a fraction. I used to work as a paralegal, he admitted. Before I came here, I needed quieter work. Lila blinked, surprised. Rowan's gaze softened. If you want, I can help you organize. Not as your lawyer, just as someone who doesn't want you alone in this. Lila's eyes burned. She nodded once. Over the next week, Rowan helped Lila gather everything she had. Emails, messages, witnesses who'd seen Damian's behavior after the accident. And then, gently, he asked, Do you have any old documents from your family? Anything about property, trusts, land? Lila went upstairs and opened the old box she kept under her bed. Dust rose like memory. Inside were papers stamped with names she didn't recognize at first. Then Rowan pointed to a signature. Hartwell, he murmured. Lila frowned. That was my mother's maiden name. Rowan's eyes narrowed, scanning. Lila, he said slowly, like he didn't want to scare her. This isn't just a name. He tapped a page. Hartwell, Education and Land Trust. Established 20 years ago. Assets, Meadowbrook parcels plus Stone Harbor coastal parcels. Beneficiary, Lila Hart. Lila stared. Her mouth went dry. No, she whispered. That can't be. My mom was a nurse. We rented. Rowan flipped another page. It's not uncommon, he said softly. Some families set up trusts quietly. Sometimes to protect someone, sometimes to hide from someone. Lila's mind raced. Damian's company, Vale Horizon, had been buying land all over Meadowbrook's outskirts in the last few years. And suddenly a sick thought crawled up her spine. What if Damian didn't just love her? What if he loved what her name unlocked? She shook her head violently as if she could shake the idea out. No, she breathed. He didn't know. He couldn't have. Rowan didn't argue. He simply pointed at a separate sheet tucked into the back. A letter. Old, yellowed. Addressed to Lila in her mother's handwriting. Lila's fingers trembled as she opened it. Rowan stayed quiet, giving her the dignity of privacy while still being near enough to catch her if she fell. Lila read, and with every line, the air in the room changed. Her mother had known. Her mother had hidden the trust, not because she didn't trust Lila, but because she feared exactly this. Feared powerful men with shiny smiles. Feared people who saw land and money before they saw a girl's heart. Lila's vision blurred. Rowan spoke gently. What does it say? Lila's voice was thin. She wrote, If anyone ever makes you feel small to keep you close, leave. Lila's breath hitched. Rowan's eyes softened. Lila pressed the letter to her chest like it could stitch her back together. And that night, for the first time, Lila understood. Her quiet life had never been powerless. It had simply been unclaimed. Stone Harbor Superior Court smelled like paper and old wood and someone's expensive cologne. Damien arrived with an entourage. A lawyer in a perfect suit, a mother with sharp eyes, a few business associates who looked bored until cameras turned their way. Damien's wheelchair was polished, sleek. Even his disability looked curated. When he saw Lila, his mouth tilted. He rolled closer, stopping just far enough to be polite. Look at you, he murmured, playing brave. Lila's stomach tightened. Rowan stood beside her, not touching, not claiming, just present. Damien's gaze flicked to Rowan. A new hero already? He scoffed. Lila's voice was steady, surprising even herself. He's not my hero, she said. He's my friend. Damien's eyes narrowed. Friends don't show up to court for free. Lila didn't answer, because she'd learned something. Not every accusation deserves oxygen. Inside the courtroom, Damien's lawyer painted a story. A devoted man ruined by tragedy. A teacher who used him for sympathy. A woman who abandoned a disabled fiancé and let gossip destroy his image. When it was Lila's turn, she stood with hands clasped to stop them shaking. The judge watched her with neutral eyes. Lila spoke simply. I didn't tell anyone to pity him, she said. I didn't tell anyone to call me noble. I didn't tell him to humiliate me. A murmur. Damien's lawyer smirked. But you admit you left him. Lila nodded. Yes. And you admit he was vulnerable. Lila's eyes met the lawyer's. Yes, she said. And that's why what he did hurt so much. Because I didn't leave him for being in a wheelchair. I left him for using his pain as a weapon. Damien's jaw clenched. The lawyer leaned in. So you're claiming Mr. Vale is abusive? Lila's chest tightened. Rowan's voice was low behind her, a reminder. Facts. Lila took a breath. I'm claiming, she said carefully, that on our wedding day, he accused me publicly of being with him for money and canceled our marriage to punish me. Damien laughed, sudden and loud. Because it was true. The judge's gavel snapped. Mr. Vale, the judge warned. Damien's eyes burned. He couldn't stop himself. He never could. When the judge allowed cross-examination, Rowan didn't speak. He wasn't counsel. But Lila's attorney, a calm woman with silver glasses, did. She presented messages. Damien texting Lila, don't act like a saint. Damien texting his mother, she'll stay if she's afraid. Damien complaining about being watched like a pitiful exhibit. Then, slowly, the narrative shifted. From poor Damien to dangerous Damien. Damien's mother stood and protested. He was in pain, she cried. You have no idea what he suffered. Lila's voice didn't rise. I do, she said softly. I held his hand through it. Silence fell, and then the judge asked for something that felt unrelated at first. Counsel, he said, the defense has submitted documents regarding land interests. I want clarification. Lila's attorney rose. Yes, Your Honor. Damien's lawyer stiffened. The judge looked down at the file. Ms. Hart, he said, and the whole room seemed to tilt toward his words. Do you recognize this trust? And that was the moment from the hook. The moment Damien's confidence cracked. Because the truth wasn't just emotional, it was structural. It was in contracts and signatures and land beneath buildings. Lila's voice was quiet. I didn't, she admitted. Not until recently. The judge nodded slowly. Yet your name is on it, he said, and Vale Horizon Properties appears to have built developments on parcels tied to this trust. A murmur exploded. Damien's lawyer shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is irrelevant to the defamation claim. The judge's eyes sharpened. It becomes relevant when the plaintiff's motive is questioned, he said coolly. And I am questioning it. Damien's face went pale. Lila felt the courtroom spinning, not from fear, but from the weight of realizing her life had been standing on hidden ground. The judge's gaze moved to Damien. Mr. Vale, he said, voice even, did you know Mrs. Hart was beneficiary to the Hartwell Trust prior to the engagement? Damien opened his mouth, closed it. His mother's eyes darted. That tiny hesitation was loud. Lila's stomach turned. Not triumph, grief. Because the question didn't just expose Damien's business, it exposed the possibility that love had been contaminated. Damien's lawyer stammered. Damien finally spat. I didn't care about her money, but his voice shook. The judge leaned back. Then you won't mind, he said, if we request a deeper review of the land agreements tied to your company. Damien's hands clenched on his wheelchair arms. His mask was slipping, and when the judge returned to the defamation claim, his tone was different, less patient. Because courts, like children, can smell dishonesty. In the end, the verdict wasn't dramatic. It was precise. Damien's claims were dismissed. The judge cited lack of evidence, contradictory testimony, and credible proof of Damien's public humiliation of Lila. Additionally, the judge referred the land matter for further review, a separate, heavier storm waiting for Damien outside this courtroom. Damien's face twisted as the gavel came down. He looked at Lila like she had stabbed him. You planned this, he hissed as people stood. Lila's eyes stung. No, she said quietly. You did. He rolled away faster than he should have been able to, wheels whispering on polished floors like a snake in retreat. Lila stood still, not because she was savoring revenge, because she was finally feeling the shape of her own spine. Rowan stepped closer, voice soft. You okay? Lila exhaled, shaky. I don't know, she admitted, but I'm not small anymore. Rowan's eyes warmed. Good, he said. You never were. Stone Harbor's rain returned like an old friend. After the trial, life didn't become perfect. It became quiet. And quiet, Lila learned, can be a kind of luxury. She kept teaching. She kept buying secondhand books. She planted gardenias on her window ledge, and when they bloomed, the scent filled her apartment like a gentle reminder, you are allowed to begin again. Rowan didn't push. He didn't suddenly become a grand romance with violins and dramatic kisses. He stayed. He walked with her to the market. He carried heavy bags without making it a performance. He listened when she spoke, and when she didn't. One evening, months later, Lila sat at her small desk and opened a notebook. The city lights outside were blurred by rain. She wrote at the top of the page, "To my future self." And then she began. She wrote about Meadowbrook, not with bitterness, but with clarity. She wrote about Damien, not as a villain in a story, but as a man who let pain become permission. She wrote about herself, the version that stood in white and couldn't breathe, and the version that stood in court and didn't beg. She wrote the sentence her mother had left her. If anyone makes you feel small to keep you close, leave. Then she added her own. If anyone loves you, they won't need you smaller to feel bigger. Her pen paused. Outside, rain tapped the window softly. In the kitchen, Rowan was making tea, moving quietly like he belonged there, not as an owner of her space, but as someone invited. Lila smiled faintly and wrote the last lines. I don't want love that is loud. I don't want love that proves itself in front of an audience. I want love that is honest in private, patient in storms, kind when nobody is clapping. If you found it, future me, don't be afraid to hold it with both hands. She closed the notebook. Rowan appeared with 2 cups of tea. He set one down gently beside her. What are you writing? He asked. Lila looked up at him. For a moment, fear flickered, old fear. Then she breathed through it. A letter, she said, to someone I'm becoming. Rowan nodded slowly. I hope she's happy, he said. Lila's eyes softened. She's learning, she replied, and that's enough. Rowan didn't reach for her hand like a claim. He simply sat beside her, close enough to share warmth, far enough to respect space. And in the quiet, with rain on glass and gardenia in the air, Lila realized the ending she wanted wasn't revenge. It was peace. It was a life that didn't need to be defended. And if this story touched something inside you, if you've ever been humiliated for loving someone, or made to feel small so another person could feel powerful, leave a small message. Not for the algorithm, for yourself. Because you are not alone. And you are allowed to begin again.